Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, a special mini slate of episodes, mini season, if you will, taking place between season 4, which wrapped up earlier in 2020, and season 5, which kicks off toward the end of August. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of a company called Score Publishing based in Nashville, Tennessee. We are very fortunate to have a phenomenal panel of folks working at the intersection of healthcare and technology to kick off what will be a slate of 5 episodes spanning the next 5 weeks, each looking at a particular aspect of voice and conversational AI in some pocket of modern healthcare. This episode is about aging in place, and we're thrilled to have 4 experts, luminaries from different walks of technology and healthcare joining us. I'm going to call on them each one by one just to introduce themselves. And Dan Messina, I'm going to start with you. Tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
Well, thank you, Bradley. My name is Dan Messina, and I am the co-founder of Hands-Free Health. Hands-Free Health is a voice recognition platform device which is designed to be able to respond to any questions that anybody may have on any healthcare related matter, provides reminders, it's very personalized. It's really the front door of healthcare and provides a 24/7 companion for the individual in their home, and also coordinates with their carekeeper. I think the difference with Hands-Free Health compared to other devices is that Hands-Free Health was designed and developed by people like myself and others on our team with 150 years of a combined experience in healthcare. And we handed it off to technical people to figure out how to make it all come together versus the other way around. And so I think we have a very good sense of what's missing in the healthcare environment and what people need.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Jean-Claude Junqua, and I always forget if I'm pronouncing that right. Am I pronouncing that right?
Very good, very close. Jean-Claude Junqua, yes.
Okay, so I was born and raised in the South, so I'll take close. Okay, so
thank you.
Jean-Claude, thank you for being here. Tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
Okay, so my name is Jean-Claude Junqua, and I have about, maybe more than 20 years of experience in the area of, speech technology. My PhD actually is on speech recognition. I worked for Panasonic for quite a long time and led the global speech activity of Panasonic. I also created a startup in the area of aging in place, for senior. Maybe we can talk about it a little, later. And currently, what I do, I created a company, a consulting company called C2Innovate. And in this context, I work with, startups and large organizations to help them, go through the challenge that they have, for startup, more product market fit, for large organization, more in terms of trying to create a new business pillar, that they may want to create. So I work in the area of healthcare, but also in a number of other areas, usually with a component related to AI, and voice is one of them.
Very cool. Jean-Claude, thank you for joining us for the show today.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Mark Gray. Mark, say hello.
Hello, and thanks for having us on, Bradley.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So Mark, take a minute, tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
I'm Mark Gray, President and Chief Technology Officer for Constant Companion. And we started in 2018 developing systems for home care using voice technology. We began focused on the older adult market, but we now span a much broader audience with contracts with the U.S. Veterans Administration. So we're working with people in all different age groups and also those with disabilities, including special needs children. Most recently during the pandemic, we released a product for telehealth and a hub in the home that it can be voice operated that does remote patient monitoring back to their healthcare providers for vitals and how that patient is doing. Excited to be here, Bradley, and I'm really excited to get to know all the other panelists here. I think since we began gaining Medicaid reimbursement capability, we'd sure love to work with Dan and Jean-Claude and Nate on partnering with what all they do, because they're got great companies.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Our fourth and final guest is Nate Treloar. Nate, say hello.
Hello, and with Mark, I agree. I look forward to continuing the conversation beyond this event with the three other panelists. My name's Nate Treloar. I am president and one of the co-founders of Orbita. We are a software company based out of Boston. And our central business model is we help healthcare organizations across this industry, whether they're healthcare systems providers, even life science companies, med tech companies, tap into the power and potential of voice, and more generally, conversational AI. And we do it through a technology platform that's designed to support the design, development, optimization of these conversational agents. Unique to what we do is we're omni-channel and multimodal infrastructure. So you develop it and maintain it within our environment. You can publish it to Alexa, you can publish it to Google, you can publish it to a chat bot, even an interactive voice response system. And these agents are designed across a variety of use cases, primarily for patient support, remote patient care against chronic use cases. Built into all that is content partnerships that we've established with the likes of the Mayo Clinic and others that allow us to bring highly clinically vetted content into these experiences, which are unique, right? These conversational AI experiences as a digital interface is not the same as a mobile app. It's not the same as a website. So taking existing content and developing it for these environments is quite different. And that's really one of our strengths. So happy to be with Bradley again, an old friend at this point. Feels like we've been doing this for a while, even though this is still a pretty nascent world we're in. Voice has been around for decades, but the resurgence powered by Alexa and others has created a big awareness of it, and we're thrilled to be part of that.
Nate, thank you for joining us. And you're right, we go way back. So this episode is about aging in place, which funny enough is exactly how I would describe what it feels like I've been doing every day for the last 3 to 4 months. Along with everybody else. There's nothing unique about that, other than maybe some beachgoers in Florida or in Missouri somewhere. We're going to get to really the fundamental question of this show, which is what was going on with voice technology and aging in place before all this, and are we seeing in this realm the same type of thing that we're seeing in other realms, which is COVID-19 accelerating the way that the world was already moving to begin with? My suspicion is yes, but I definitely want to get the panel to sign off on that and provide perspective. But before we even get to that, I want to ask the four of y'all, how has this pandemic altered, just your own business and organization? Let's take a minute and just talk about that a minute. I'd love to hear what has happened since, I mean, it would be controversial to even say a time, since early 2020. I guess that's apolitical enough. How has COVID-19 changed what you and your organization are doing? And I'm going to go through the exact same order here. Dan, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, thanks, Bradley. It's had a dramatic change, to say the least, in a few areas. First of all, the way we run our business now is virtual. Now, in our case, we were so early stage, we hadn't really gotten office space yet. We were thinking about getting some, so we were fortunate not to get any. But we've been required to work virtually, and it's been pretty effective. But the biggest impact, I think, from a production standpoint, is that we work with China. And as such, we've been delayed several months as a result of this whole COVID-19. They, of course, experienced what we are experiencing now a few months before us. We now are finally getting product shipped and delivered, so that's good. And I would just add that COVID-19 has been obviously very tragic and very bad, and it's forced us all to do things quite differently. But from a product appreciation perspective, it's brought it to light. I mean, it's clearly now, people are seeing that they're going to be isolated, and how do they handle isolation? How do they deal with their physicians? How do they get information about medical activities and events and reminders? How do you deal with a carekeeper who may be 3,000 miles away, whether it be a son or a daughter? So all this is really kind of forces us to test the premise of isolation, and which is one of the things that Hands-Free Health offers by providing a companion in your home 24/7 that can also communicate with your carekeeper.
Excellent. Jean-Claude, same question for you. How has COVID-19 impacted you, your business, your organization?
Yeah, so I think what is interesting is that, it's very uneven in the sense, I work with, a few companies. Some are, developing a business online. For them, there was almost, kind of, change there. When they're developing SaaS model or this kind of business. Maybe what changed, for this type of business is that you don't have the direct contact, kind of necessarily with the users. So a lot of things are done online. For example, if the company is at the initial stage, you don't talk to user, face to face. You have to do that online, but you can manage these things. Really, the big difference is that when there is a hardware component, for example, a little like Dan, for example, one of the companies making things in India, and there was a number of delays, and it was very difficult to get the things shipped and so on. So, depending on the type of business, there are quite a bit of, of difference, and that's basically what, what we observe, what we found. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Mark, same question for you. How has COVID-19 impacted your business and organization?
Well, I wasn't as smart as Dan. We built a factory and built a brand new office, and we launched it January 1st with 10 production lines for manufacturing. And gosh darn it, 6 weeks after you open, you got to go backpedal. And then by March, we were quarantining. So only essential personnel is allowed in the building. They look like, someone out of a movie with hazmat gear on, with the gloves and the plastic shields and face shields. And we sterilize all of our systems because we ship them directly into nursing homes and assisted living facilities, among other things. And Dan, I'm sure you're dealing with the same thing as we serve the most vulnerable in our population. But learning how to telecommute, and had to get some of our employees souped up home internet so they could do this kind of stuff, because we were learning how to connect ourselves as a team. But it's been educational for sure. We're better prepared now than we were back in February or March.
Excellent. And Nate, same question to you. How has COVID-19 impacted Orbita?
Yeah, well, I think all of us probably have had the experience of seeing some validation of what we're doing. And virtual healthcare, telemedicine, has certainly put a spotlight on the value proposition of what we're all trying to do. There's some stats out there from March, April, even up until now, about the rise of telemedicine and virtual healthcare visits. It's off the charts for some of these companies. Zoom has become a dominant platform for communication in healthcare. I'm sure they benefited from it, but maybe didn't expect it quite to the degree that it's being used now. For us in particular, just operationally, we've had to accommodate working out remote. We had a small office in Boston. We're not a big company, about 25 full-time employees, and we were already kind of well-suited to remote work. The nature of our business is well-suited. We don't ship devices or anything like that. We're pure software. So it didn't really have a particularly material impact, other than culturally, it's not the same without seeing people face to face. So we've had to come to terms with that. The business itself, we're doing all right. What happened for us in the early part of the year is we were gearing up for HIMSS, the big healthcare information system conference down in Orlando. And it was, if you guys remember February, there were a lot of conferences that were getting canceled or going virtual. HIMSS was sort of a holdout, surprisingly, given it was healthcare. They held out right until I think the Friday before. And we were trying to decide whether we would go or not, and some of the big participants are already canceling out of it. And then when that canceled, we already had a plan. We said, all right. At the same time, a lot of our Q1 opportunities were saying we can't talk right now, so come back, until once we work through this pandemic issue, healthcare systems in particular. So we said, our highest priority right now is to be relevant to our clients, to help them respond to this crisis. So how can we do that with the technology we have? So we created a COVID bot, like a lot of people did. It's up on our website at orbita.ai. We made it freely available, so you can download it and put it on your website. It answers basic questions about the coronavirus, and it also does a simple screener with content sourced from the CDC. And a lot of people are doing that. We put ours up. We think ours is better, but the end goal there was really just to be relevant, to make sure we had something out there in the market, keep our team focused. And I'm very proud of what we did, because we literally pivoted in that 2-week interval and just put all our attention on this. The things that we were planning to talk about at HIMSS, we set aside. It was all COVID all the time. And that's helped us. Actually, we closed a funding round in April, the end of April, like right in the height of it. And not simply because of what we were doing. It was an investor and investors that were looking at us anyway. But I think partly our attention to this, the validation of what virtual healthcare means in this new world, it's created an awareness. So we're very, very fortunate as a business to have that support and to have the support of our clients, and to be keeping very, very busy.
So no, that's great, and thanks to all four of you for the perspective there. What has COVID-19 impacted conferences? I had not noticed that. Thank you. That's much longer than the podcast there, and much more profane than what Mark Gray had to say. So anyhow, so Nate, with what you were just describing, you were really sort of getting into what I alluded to earlier, which is that you can call it a silver lining, you can call it whatever you want, but with COVID-19 and this pandemic, it seems to have this attribute of accelerating, moving the world faster to where the world was already headed in several different aspects of different verticals, different businesses and industries, in our personal lives to some degree. And with what you were talking about with the investors that were looking at Orbita, they were already looking at Orbita, and with COVID-19, maybe that caused something to happen a little bit earlier than perhaps it might. Maybe it moved that up. We're going to go in reverse order here. And Nate, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to work backward. Paint me a picture. Paint me a picture of what voice technology and AI and conversational AI, whatever you want to call it, was doing for those trying to age in place and wanting to age in place versus what it is doing now and what it looks like it can do now. And, has it accelerated things, or has it stifled things? Paint me a picture.
It has accelerated things, I think it's fair to say, without question. And not specifically just voice. I mean, voice is a capability for improving the patient engagement, engagement with an individual at home, outside, or wherever they are. But telemedicine, Mark mentioned some of the work they're doing, is another set of capabilities, right? How do you connect with somebody remotely? How do you support somebody who's in their home with, need of elder care, or with an actual chronic condition, and then how do you create the social connection with them? All of those principles existed before the COVID pandemic. What this has done is put a sharp spotlight on the need for these kinds of technologies and solutions, given all the obvious reasons of social distancing, reluctance in some cases for individuals to go into a clinical setting for fear of contracting a virus or whatever, and so from our perspective, what we are seeing is just an acceleration. So where I would have said 6 months ago or a year ago, there were a lot of people who were what I often call voice curious, where there was sort of a curiosity about the potential and a willingness to do some exploration and exploring. Right now, it's become a bit more mission critical. Again, and I would say voice is part of it. We're doing plenty of chatbots, right? We do just as many, if not more, conversational experiences delivered over devices like this, some of which support voice and some of which are text-based. But the idea of being able to reach somebody remotely through a digital endpoint, that in a conversational agent, it's I wouldn't say right now that it's mission critical, but it's much closer to mission critical than it was 8 to 9 months ago, for sure.
Excellent. Mark, same question for you. Paint us a picture of pre-pandemic voice and AI interaction with aging in place versus what's changed, and if it's accelerated, if it's stayed the same. Your thoughts?
I agree with everything Nate just said. I've seen the level of need for what voice technology brings into a home healthcare environment move from a nice to have, in some cases, to a must have. And we've seen our already nice, steady, rapid growth move into hyper growth this past quarter. So much so we're now have an installed user base in 200 plus healthcare partners around the United States and now into Canada, and pandemic driven. I mean, it's just been incredible. What I think that the end user is going through is we've all had this globally had a lesson in social isolation the past couple of months. And remember the first 6 weeks of quarantine and what that feel like. And as you were talking earlier, Nate was mentioning it was odd not seeing all of our teammates at work every day, and we're doing it because we're doing it remotely. A lot of the seniors that we serve, and Dan probably can relate to this as well. We're dealing with folks that often go 5 or 6 days out of a week without seeing another person, and that's year round for them. That's not COVID. That's just aging in place and being somewhat isolated. So I've seen a growth, Bradley, in the use of voice and video technology, such as, an Echo Show or regardless of the brand, Google or any of the great AI platforms and voice platforms that have voice and video screens, where they can video connect with families. So it's not just the telehealth, which we also support on a more encrypted platform, the social determinants of health, of not feeling lonely, isolated, and depressed. And that's a big deal. And I think that's part of what I feel is driving this great increase we're seeing in the demand for it. But I think it's moved from a nice to have in many cases to more of a must have. And that's what I've seen.
Excellent. Jean-Claude, same question for you. Voice and AI in aging in place before, voice and AI in aging in place amidst. What have you seen with this pandemic?
Yeah, so what Mark just said actually is a very nice segue, for me. In 2013-14, I created a startup inside a big corporation in Panasonic, which was about loneliness. Because, the big problem of aging in place, it's really loneliness. We found this in nursing home. We found this, when people are at home, they have difficulties, they withdraw. Their world is becoming smaller. And then, what we tried to do at the time was to try to use technology to make their world bigger. So at the time, he was using a tablet connected to a cloud, software, and we were exchanging pictures, doing video chats, basically in a very easy way, so that the technology is hidden, but they could communicate in a way that technology could help. And what I am seeing is that, at the time we were not using voice, though, I didn't mind, to introduce it as we were going. But what I am seeing is that I see the acceleration of using technology and technology like voice now, to be able to do that. Why? Because voice is the most natural way of communicating. And, with voice, you hide, technology. And I can give you an example, actually, about 3 months ago. In my family, my mother is 87. She never connected to the internet. She never wrote an SMS. And we installed the WhatsApp, message with voice input. Now she's sending me messages with voice input using dictation, and I can communicate with her, and she's sending me messages, and she's so happy. And it's really just an example, very concrete, how technology and the isolation that people are kind of feeling through things like COVID-19, that is kind of accelerating, I would say, the loneliness that they have, and technology that can help them feel connected, and hiding the technology, making it transparent, and making them do the thing that they couldn't do, or they even didn't imagine that they could do. And so I really see this as a trend, voice as an input, for example, voice as a way to use digital kind of technology in a way that is very natural.
Excellent. And no, I was so focused on your very profound point, and my power starts flickering off and on. I don't know if that's some sort of message or what's going on there. Jean-Claude, that's excellent. Dan, same question for you. Voice and conversational AI pre-pandemic, amidst the pandemic, what's changed? Your thoughts?
First of all, if you hear my landscaper in the background, I apologize up front for that. But let me just say that everything that's been said before me, I completely agree with. It's clearly accelerated the pace at which voice is used. But I want to highlight that when we started Hands-Free Health, we saw some dramatic trends occurring in healthcare as a whole. One of those was that a greater burden was placed on the individual consumer. The second was that we had an aging population. And the third was that the carekeeper for that aging population wasn't always in the same zip code. And so we felt there was a need to provide some way of communicating between the carekeeper and the senior, the aging person, and also recognize the aging person as having to have a lot more responsibility for their health care than was the case before. And with voice, you can accommodate all those needs quite well. And COVID-19 has made us have to do that quicker because people are now isolated. And it's forced that senior person to deal with understanding healthcare needs and working with their carekeeper in an isolated environment. So, as everyone before me has already said, it has greatly accelerated the pace of use of voice, but it was something that I think we all saw coming anyway at some point in the future.
No, that's great. And thanks to all four of you for your comments on that. We're going to go through and I'm going to ask each of the four of you what the biggest challenge is confronting continued growth and evolution with how voice is impacting aging in place. And then we'll wrap up with each member of the panel saying a trend that they expect to see in 2020, in the second half of 2020, which just starts today. So Dan, I'm gonna start with you. We're gonna work through in reverse of the reverse. Share with us, in your mind, the biggest challenge that you see confronting the continued adoption and growth and evolution of voice and conversational AI, either as it relates specifically to aging in place, or if you want to take it broader to modern healthcare, that's fine too, either way.
I think that's an easy one for me. It's security. I think that when you're dealing with something like care, obviously you have to have a secure environment. It needs to be HIPAA compliant for sure, but it has to be secure. People have to feel comfortable that when they are asking a question to their voice recognition device, that question is not being recorded. They're not listening in for other issues. And I think that that's something that we at Hands-Free Health take very seriously. When you're dealing with health information, you have to be secure. You can't allow a bunch of apps to come in. It can't be an open source for apps. It has to be closed source for apps. You have to have control over the security environment. And people need to become comfortable that they can use a voice recognition device and feel secure using it. It's not listening in everything you're saying. It's not recording what you're saying. And you can do it in a safe, secure environment.
Excellent. Jean-Claude, your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree on security. I would like to emphasize something also that Dan mentioned, which is privacy, data privacy. A lot of these voice apps have been developed in the area of consumer products. You can take Alexa, you can take Google Home, and so on. And I think there is a need for making this technology kind of work in a more kind of HIPAA compliant data privacy setting to be able to propagate better in the healthcare world. And the second one that I would like to add without taking too much time is interoperability. There is more to do so that you can use different time different kind of voice system and they still remember eventually who you are and can kind of carry on based on who you are. And actually this area of data privacy and interoperability are tackled right now in a standard that is called Open Voice Network, in which actually I'm involved in, and because they are kind of essential, for propagating the usage, especially in areas like healthcare.
Excellent. Mark, your thoughts, biggest challenge?
Well, I like Dan's point about security, and unlike my panel mates here today, I don't have the great background in healthcare and voice that each of them do. My background was in cybersecurity, did that for the federal government at the White House and Department of Homeland Security. And so when I came into this platform and surrounded myself with some great voice tech teammates, first thing we did was build a private cloud where we anonymize our user base. And I found it was really almost every customer we talked to, Bradley, the older adult population in particular, and you're talking 50 million seniors and 10,000 a day, turning 65, it's a big audience. And there we're worried about Big Brother and people who's listening in. And even beyond the HIPAA compliance, I just want to know, like I know that I'm safe if I have the smart speaker. We've seen customers who bought them online and have them in their house, but they're unplugged because they're afraid of them. I mean, I've literally had these conversations. So we anonymize our users where, whether it's Google or Amazon, it doesn't matter what brand speaker, they don't know their name, their address, or even what state they're in. We anonymize it down at that level and encrypt it. The other challenge I see is connectivity. There's been greater stress on the bandwidth system, and some older adults don't have internet at home. So we've had to fabricate systems with Wi-Fi built in, cellular 4G and 5G systems. So that's keeping us busy, I would say, is security and communicating that security so people feel safe, and connectivity, access to the network.
Excellent. And Nate, your thoughts on challenges?
Well, we've been writing about privacy and security issues with voice for 3 years, and completely agree on the challenges there. I think, to get right to the point, I think maybe Dan mentioned this, is that the consumer devices that are out there from the big guys like Google and Amazon, well, Amazon in particular have made some moves to address the privacy and security concerns. The genesis of those technologies were consumer-facing, generally non-healthcare related use cases. So there is real and legitimate concern about uses of those devices for healthcare reasons. Even beyond that, there are people who have legitimate concerns about their personal privacy and security of their information, whether it's healthcare related or not. for an always on, always listening device. That's just the reality of where we are. We will see that change as the big guys make some moves. Amazon introduced a HIPAA eligible version of Amazon Alexa last year in April, but it's very limited in its availability. There are, there are rumors of things coming in the future that will open those kind of capabilities up more broadly, and would never turn my back on Amazon with respect to what they may aspire to do in getting into this $1 trillion market more heavily. We are already seen them make some significant moves into healthcare. But be that as it may, I think just the reality of an always on, always listening voice device are legitimate concerns for privacy and security of data. The other one I would agree to, I think it was Mark who said that, gosh, Mark, what was your second point? I had it, I lost it.
Connectivity.
Connectivity, yes, thank you, that was it. Yeah, I agree with that one as well. I mean, we all, most of us have the luxury of high bandwidth connections at home, but when you're really trying to reach somebody in a rural setting, or who for one reason or another doesn't have access to to bandwidth, even though these voice devices and the packets are fairly small, they don't take up a huge amount of bandwidth. A little bit of latency just really compromises the quality of the experience. If you want to be feeling like you're talking to a proxy for a human, you want a conversational cadence, and sometimes with low bandwidth you don't get that. Which leads me to the third thing, which is the importance of the user experience itself. This has really become more of a dominant theme in the voice world over the last year or so, is the importance of developing voice user experiences that have empathy and are designed for the personas that they're intended for, right? In traditional digital environments, you often are in marketing, for example, you're told to write your content for the 8th grade reading level or 5th grade reading level. And when you're creating a voice experience, you have to be cautious, particularly in healthcare, to not get too clinical. We are constantly working with our clients who want to build these healthcare applications to say that words like convalescence and multisyllabic words aren't necessarily the ones you want to be using. So you gotta there's a UX design or voice UX design sensibility that's really important to have in any development effort that you're taking on. And it's hard to find those people. It's getting easier. There's more of them coming into the marketplace, but it's hard to find good VUX designers.
So you wouldn't say we ought to juxtapose some luminaries and get their philosophy? No, anyway. Yeah, so those are great points, and I appreciate that. The point on security, it just reminds me every time security comes up, which is often on this show or anywhere else I think about. I don't remember what episode it was. I remember who it was who made the comment, but it was the person that we had keynote one of our early Alexa conferences, Keisha Williams, who is a well-known speaker, technologist, and she's also an Alexa champion, which means that Amazon has in their purview anointed you as someone doing some fantastic work with the ecosystem, which she certainly is. She was on This Week in Voice, and amidst the conversation on one of the stories of that particular week, she made the comment that despite the fact that she works with her daughters to create Alexa skills, and that is a very valuable thing. It's a family exercise for them and a lot of fun. At the end of every day, she unplugs all of her Alexa devices. And I was like, what? So, here is a person that, Amazon has said this is an Alexa champion doing amazing work, who does not feel like things have progressed enough. And this is a couple of years ago, mind you, but still, to where she would, at the end of the day, go through her house and unplug every device. I just thought that was one of the most remarkable things I'd ever heard. And we had a lengthy conversation about it when she said that. it's interesting to me to look at what's happened with the pandemic. I'll make this comment and then we'll get to the trends and we'll be done here. But one of the things I found fascinating, you know, everybody has on the panels talked about security. With the pandemic, one of the things that we have seen with voice that I just find really interesting is that Facebook portal sales are stratospheric. And I've made the point before that if it had been, you know, Amazon is a trusted consumer brand. They advocate for the customer. They have a long history of being willing to put anybody out of business in favor of getting that widget to you 2 hours faster or getting it to you for 5 cents cheaper. So they've built this brand equity up around that. Now you can imagine what would have happened with voice and conversational AI and smart speakers and all this if Facebook had been the first company to try to bring it to market. It would not have worked nearly as well because people don't trust that company. And yet, in the midst of the pandemic, one of the major things we've seen is that Facebook portals, which you could beg someone to buy it and they wouldn't have done it. You could have sold a Facebook portal and a $200 bill to somebody for $200 and they still would have said no. They're flying off the shelves, and I think it's an interesting commentary, or at least an interesting thing to take note of on maybe there's some shifts in our demand for privacy, you know, that we saw at the height of this pandemic, that maybe as we're coming out of, you know, again, I hate to say coming out of it because someone's going to ascribe politics to that, you know, it's changing and evolving. We're understanding things more, and the disease is killing less people, that maybe privacy, I would agree, privacy will surge back to being a foremost focus. So anyway, sorry for that soliloquy. I just felt like that was an interesting thing to point out, hearing y'all talk about security, which I think is warranted. We will close this show with each of the four panelists sharing what they see what they think that they'll see as a trend emerging in the second half of 2020 into 2021. Today is July 1st. It's the start of the second half of the year. It feels like the first half of 2020 was like several millennia long. But you know, here we are. And Nate, I'm going to start with you and work in reverse to close the show. Tell us one thing that you're going to go on the record, put on the Nostradamus hat. What is something we're going to see in the second half of 2020 as it relates to voice, AI, and healthcare?
Well, I think you're going to see at least one announcement from one of the big guys about their ambitions to bring voice more into healthcare use cases. We talked about, you know, Amazon, Google, others. There'll be at least one. This isn't really a Nostradamus prediction because there's one every 6 months, right? But I think for this little panel and what we're all aspiring to do, we're going to see a pretty significant announcement in that area.
Excellent. Mark, give us one prediction for the second half of 2020.
I think that as regardless of when the pandemic winds down or we get a vaccine or when we see the end of COVID as the biggest healthcare risk, I believe that telehealth and connecting patients remotely to care, as well as, you know, from a social perspective, is here to stay. I think it got a 5-year accelerator because of COVID, and I think that trajectory will continue to grow.
Excellent. Jean-Claude, your prediction for the second half of 2020.
Yeah, I would have chosen the previous two, but I will add another one. I agree with the previous speaker, but what I would say that I think, and we are seeing it already, is more voice app, you know, that are kind of designed, you know, to access some information, like, you know, Nathan mentioned with Orbita accessing, you know, COVID information. We'll see more of this in terms of accessing in an easy way some information in some narrow domain, and I think that's a trend that will continue.
Excellent. And Dan, your prediction for the second half of 2020.
Well, I clearly agree with Nate. We're going to see other large players try to get involved in voice as it pertains to health. The problem they're going to face, obviously, is the same one they've always faced, and that's security and trust, and that's going to become an issue. That aside, I think we're going to see a very aggressive move toward using telehealth and voice for medical visits that hadn't been thought about in the past, and whether it be your routine visits with your physician, or whether it be just checkups with your physician. I think we're going to see that done much more now through telehealth and voice than had been the case in the past.
Excellent. Gentlemen, what a pleasure to spend some time with you. First day of July 2020, talking about what we hope to see. You know, and you know, I feel like turn the page on the calendar. It's time for a more sort of hopeful disposition. Y'all have certainly given it to us today. Thank you very much for being part of the show.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For This Week in Voice, our special healthcare series, episode 1 of 5. Thank you for listening, watching, if you're watching on YouTube. Until next time.